For many people, December 25th is the most holy and joyous date of the year because it is Jesus' birthday. Of course, many people are wrong. The fact of the matter is that in Jesus' time, people didn't have calendars or watches like they do today, nor were they particularly concerned with such things as birthdays, and so no one actually knows when Jesus was born. What's even more surprising, though, is that no one even knows for sure why December 25th was chosen by the early Christians as the commemoration date. There are theories, yes, but no clear answers. So what are these theories and how does it affect our lives as Christians today? This is Catholicism in Focus. The fact that we don't know the actual date of Jesus' birth shouldn't come as a surprise to many people. Jesus was born to insignificant parents in a backwater town on the outskirts of an ancient nation. Records like that simply weren't kept like they are today. What might come as a surprise, though, is the fact that the first official record in Rome of Christmas being celebrated on December 25th doesn't appear until the year 336. 336. As in 300 years after the death of Christ. There's evidence that Christians celebrated Christmas as early as the late 2nd century, but the date varied widely over place and time. It was not until decreed by Rome in the mid-4th century that the entire Western Church celebrated on the same date. It's for this reason that the prevailing theory for many years was that the date for Christmas was chosen by Christians as a way to supersede pagan holidays. You see, in the Roman calendar, December 25th was the feast of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun, as well as the finale of the week-long festival of Saturnalia, a commemoration of the passing of the winter solstice, the time when the days begin to get longer and light returns to the darkness. It was a time of gift-giving, constant partying, and going door-to-door singing, while naked. Christians of the time would have had no trouble finding parallels between these feasts and the worship of their own God, Jesus, who was described as the rising sun and the light in the darkness, and would have certainly wanted to reappropriate the debauchery of the Roman holidays for something a bit more virtuous. Being that the Feast of Christmas became an official Roman holiday in the time of Constantine, a convert to Christianity, many over the years have suggested that December 25th was chosen precisely as a means of enculturation. They took pagan customs and Christianized them in order to gain converts. Which would be pretty on brand for the church. Rather than abolish local customs, we have a long history of trying to find the truth in pagan religions and build upon it. This theory, called the history of religions, gained a lot of ground in the 18th and 19th centuries as the field of comparative religion was taking off. Some have used this as evidence against the Catholic Church, claiming that it was paganized in the process, while most recognize it as the Church Fathers' effective use of evangelization, meeting the Romans in their own situation. It's a simple and coherent theory, which is why it's remained the predominant assumption for the last 200 years, and many sources claim it to be fact without question. This is why the date was chosen, they say. Except, the simple answer of history rarely tells the whole story. As many scholars have pointed out, the fact that Rome made December 25th the official date of Christmas in 336 doesn't mean that this date wasn't firmly established in other places first. While the date of Christmas varied from place to place, the celebration on December 25th goes as far back as the early 3rd century. In around 202, St. Hippolytus wrote in a commentary on Daniel that the celebration of Christmas was in fact December 25th, and in 221, the Christian traveler Julius Africanus wrote that Jesus was conceived on March 25th, 9 months before December 25th. Over the course of the 3rd century, the observance of Christmas on this date grew in prominence, becoming largely uncontested by the early 4th century. Which is interesting, because the celebration of the sun god on December 25th wasn't instituted by the Roman Emperor Aurelian until the year 274. This is well after Christians had been using the date for their own feast. More importantly, this would have been in a time when Christians had no interest in blending with pagan culture. Besides intermittent persecution, the 3rd century was actually a time of separation for Christians as they worked to develop their own distinct identity. Synchronization in this time just doesn't make sense. It's for this reason that scholars of late have rejected the common history of religions theory and posed their own, the calculations theory. Relying heavily on patristic sources, this theory suggests that the date of Christmas, at least in its original practice, came about completely independent of Roman culture, determined rather by calculating Jesus' birth based on when he was conceived. While this might seem to make the question even more difficult, there was a commonly held belief in the early church that Jesus was conceived and died on the same date, that his incarnation represented perfect unity, celebrating creation and recreation at one and the same time. Dating the crucifixion was not exactly a science either, but there was far more evidence to go on than his birth. There were disputes, as one would expect, with many in the West suggesting March 25th, traditionally the vernal equinox, and fittingly, the date rabbis believe God created the world, while those in the East calculated this date to be April 6th. Add 9 months to these dates, and you calculate Christmas to be either December 25th or January 6th, dates that have served as the remembrance of Jesus' birth since the 3rd century. What's particularly fascinating about this theory is that given the growing prominence of Christians by the late 3rd century, many scholars have begun to suggest that the history of religions theory does have some merit, it's just backwards. Christians didn't pick December 25th to Christianize the Romans. The Romans, seeing the power of such an important Christian feast, instituted Sol Invictus in 274 to Romanize the Christians. Mind blown. So, which theory makes the most sense? That the church, seeing the debauchery of the Roman religion, decided to normalize its own celebration to coincide with the pagans in an attempt to evangelize them, or that this celebration had been developing independently over time, and when Christians recognized the coincidence, they reinterpreted the significance of that day. Based on what we read from the historical accounts, there's no reason to believe that either theory is fully right or fully wrong. It's clear that Christians were celebrating Christmas even on December 25th, long before any direct interaction with the Roman religion. They either genuinely believed that Jesus was born on that date, or chose it because of theological reasons, and while there were many different opinions, one did emerge naturally prior to any Roman declaration. At the same time, nothing ever develops in a vacuum. Christians from the 4th century on were well aware of the Roman practices and knew that their own feast had similar themes. Theologians like Augustine noted how fitting it was that Christmas would be celebrated on the same date and how it could be used for the purposes of evangelization. The church very well could have had a long-established tradition for that date, but only chose to officially normalize it when the opportunity for evangelization presented itself. And yet, there's not a single line of 4th century evidence suggesting that this was the reason they chose the date. In fact, it's not until the 12th century that it is first proposed as the primary motivation. And ultimately, does it really matter? Regardless of whether it was chosen because we believe Christ was conceived on the same date as he was crucified, or because we saw people looking for light in the darkness and knew just what they needed, the end result is the same. We are a people who believes that God came into the world to be its light and life, that Jesus Christ lived, died, and was resurrected so that we might do the same. Whether or not December 25th is Jesus' real birthday has no effect on our faith. What matters is that he did come, and we are inspired to come together to celebrate it with the world.